What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Who was Dorothy Arnold, the heiress at the center of New York's oldest cold case? The family of Dorothy Arnold opens up about how she vanished more than a century ago. Dorothy Arnold's disappearance has enthralled people ever since she vanished on December 12, 1910. The 25-year-old socialite went dress shopping for her little sister Marjorie's upcoming debutante ball that icy Monday morning from her Upper East Side mansion. She told a friend she was shopping with her mother, and told her mother she'd rather shop alone. Dorothy was the eldest daughter of the high society Arnolds, a wealthy and well-connected family whose roots date back to the Mayflower. She was also the niece of a Supreme Court justice. She casually carried $30 in cash, which is equivalent to nearly $1,000 in modern dollars, and she dressed in the utmost fashion of New York City. Her passport, jewelry, and clothing were all at home. Dorothy appeared to be in good spirits when she bought a humor book and went to Park and Tilford to buy a half-pound box of chocolates, both of which she billed her father's accounts for. Dorothy casually mentioned her plans to walk home through Central Park just before 2 at the corner of 27th Street and 5th Avenue. The conversation was brief but lively, and Dorothy bumped into a friend there just before 2. After that, she waved goodbye to her friend and vanished for good. Today, the oldest missing persons case in New York City, the sensational disappearance of Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, has mystified detectives and citizens ever since. But none more so than her own family, perhaps, whose living descendants learned about her case like everyone else. I was in my 30s when I read the justice story in the Sunday Daily News that featured the case, recalls Jane Vollmer, Dorothy's great-niece. She recognized her family name in the newspaper column that reported true crimes, made the connection, and asked her father. Then and now, the Arnold family only reluctantly speaks about Dorothy. Rebecca Vollmer, Vollmer's mother, was born 5 years after Dorothy vanished, but nobody knows if she ever talked about it. Vollmer suspects that this is the one that has her ancestor rolling in her grave because no public statement has been made since more than a century ago. My grandmother would be absolutely horrified to have all this dug up 100 years later. Dorothy Arnold's strange disappearance. The Arnold family knew something was amiss when Dorothy didn't return home for dinner. They contacted friends if she hadn't returned by nightfall. And when she was still missing in the morning, the Arnolds hired a lawyer and a team of private investigators from the Pinkerton agency. They didn't call the police, however, for 6 weeks. Whether or not the above sounds suspicious depends on who you ask and when. I think the attitude about the police was that they were for drunks, immigrants, and criminals, says Vollmer. Mark Vollmer, her younger brother who is now 67 years old, agrees. We take it for granted now that of course you would call the police, he asserts. But people were very private back then. The media, whose rampant speculations would be and ultimately were socially devastating, was probably worse than the police. But when Pinkerton detectives came up empty, Patriarch Francis Rose Arnold reluctantly called the New York Police Department and held a press conference on January 25. He gave a detailed description of Dorothy. She was pretty, weighed 140 pounds, and she was 5 feet 4. Wearing a navy dress that was ankle-length and a velvet hat on top of her full pompadour. Today, he offered a substantial reward of $1,000, or approximately $33,000, for any information that could lead to her location. The disappearance of Dorothy Arnold made the New York Times front page the following day. According to the article, the police believed Dorothy had run away to marry rather than commit suicide or committed suicide, despite the fact that her mother was on the verge of nervous collapse and her father was prostrated with grief and worry. There is no trace of insanity in the family, and the young woman had never shown signs of a troubled mind, although she was devoted to books and spoke several languages. Indeed, Dorothy Arnold wasn't like most girls of her era and status. A recent literature graduate of Bryn Mawr College, a liberal college in Philadelphia, Dorothy aspired to more than marriage. She wanted to become a writer and had been unsuccessfully submitting short stories to McClure's magazine. She had requested a studio apartment in Greenwich Village's Bohemian district, which her father forbade. When her family made fun of her writing, she used her ample allowance to get a private post office box. Miss Arnold was not of a secretive nature, the Times wrote. A family member stated last night that, as far as they were aware, she had never been engaged, despite the fact that she has been admired by numerous young men. Dorothy kept a lot of secrets from her family, and the press were about to look into them. The alleged dark side of Dorothy Arnold. On February 15, the Daily News broke the shocking news that Dorothy had pawned her jewelry in September to pay for a week-long liaison at Boston's Hotel Essex. Dorothy was actually with George S. Even though she had told her family that she was going to Cambridge to visit a girlfriend. Griscom Jr., a Pittsburgh bachelor of 40 years old who was unemployed and had been seeing her in secret ever since she was at Bryn Mawr. Among his many improprieties, Griscom had an embarrassing broken engagement to another rich heiress, who called off the wedding the night before. Friends said that Griscom had also proposed to Dorothy, but Dorothy's father strongly opposed the proposal. The Arnolds denied everything, but it was revealed that Dorothy's mother and older brother, John, had traveled to Europe several weeks earlier to locate and confront her boyfriend in person. One headline read, "Griscom licked by young Arnold in a foreign hotel." Griscom declared his love for Dorothy and his intention to wed her upon her return, denying any knowledge of her whereabouts. According to historian Sylvia Pettem, who included Dorothy Arnold in her book, Cold Case Chronicles Mysteries, Murders and the Missing, the path laid out for Dorothy was obviously to marry a suitable man from an equally well-to-do, well-connected family and raise children to do the same. Dorothy's aspirations to move out, write, and date whomever she wanted proves to Pettem that the heiress was already deviating from that path. Dorothy just didn't fit the mold that was expected of her, says Pettem. Despite her sunny disposition and privileged lot in life, a surfaced letter to Griscom revealed a sadder side to his clandestine lover. "McClure's has turned me down," she wrote. "Failure stares me in the face. I only see a straight road ahead of me. Then, mother will always have the ominous impression that an accident has occurred." To be clear, her mother never lost hope that her daughter would return. Claims and theories regarding Dorothy Arnold's disappearance. The House of Mystery, a Pittsburgh suburbs maternity hospital, was raided by police in April 1914, sparking a slew of other theories. They arrested C. Dorothy was alleged to have been one of many women who had died on Meredith's table and been cremated in the cellar. Meredith was a doctor who provided illegal abortions. Some people believe that Dorothy had traveled to Pittsburgh on the advice of Griscom for a procedure that caused her death, and that she had become pregnant during her secret weekend in Boston. Frances Arnold called this theory ridiculous. 2 years later, a convict confessed he'd been paid $250 by a rich man from New York to move and bury the heiress' body in the cellar of a suburban New York residence. Numerous homes in the area were dug up by police, but nothing was found. Arnold said that the man spoke completely nonsense. The author and historian has since changed her mind, despite the fact that Pettem's Cold Case Chronicles ultimately favored the latter as Dorothy's most likely fate. According to Pettem, "I used to believe she died as a result of a botched abortion, but now I think she left and started a new life." In an era before social security numbers, Pettem says, disappearing was as easy as changing your name and hairstyle. Certainly plenty of pretty brunettes looked close enough. In 1914, a woman living in Los Angeles under the name Ella Nevins claimed she was the missing socialite. "If you don't believe I am Dorothy Arnold," the Gettysburg Times quoted, "ask my sister Marjorie. She will be aware of the reason my father does not respond to my letters." However, the Arnold family was inundated with fictitious random notes, bogus sightings, and Dorothy postcards in addition to numerous similar claims. One simply stated, "I am safe," and it appeared to be written by Dorothy. Until his death in 1922, Dorothy's family publicly maintained that they believed she had been kidnapped and murdered. He secretly spent $1 million on his never-ending search for Dorothy, according to a family legend. Dorothy Arnold's family speaks out. It's possible that Frances Arnold didn't want to be found, so she couldn't find his daughter. Additionally, it's possible that the Arnolds concealed the truth about Dorothy's fate in order to avoid controversy. However, it is more likely that they were as clueless as the rest of us, with family trauma serving as true crime material for us. Martha LaFata, another Vollmer sibling, asserts that the sensationalism continues to be so detrimental to the family. The few podcasts she's listened to felt flippant and snarky, she says, and conjecture is pointless. She asserts, respecting the fact that these people are gone and not engaging in speculation is the best thing I can do for the family. Like my mother and grandmother, I am very private. Jane is sympathetic as well. Dorothy was out shopping for a dress for my grandmother's party, which I would think made it even harder on her. My grandmother wasn't mean or anything, but she wasn't warm and cuddly either. Marjorie got married when she was 20 to a wealthy and well-liked man, but she later got divorced and moved to France. Marjorie eventually stopped using the name Arnold entirely, probably to avoid fame. Rebecca, Marjorie's daughter, was depressed her entire life. She got a surprise when another family member died. Mark claims that my mother destroyed all of Dorothy's letters and papers. If there was a family secret, my mother might have never known. And if she did, it went with her to the grave. Would the Arnolds prefer that it stay there forever? 100 years later, I don't expect any kind of resolution, says Jane. I don't know that there's a happy ending to be had, agrees Martha. Mark, however, is the lone believer of the bunch. It'd be pretty cool if someone asked for DNA to triangulate it back to us, he says. I suppose anything can happen. We may never know what really happened, but Dorothy Arnold's story continues to fascinate. She was 25 years old, an heiress born into wealth, refinement and social position, the eldest daughter of the prestigious Arnold family whose ancestry traced back to the Mayflower and whose name opened doors to the highest circles of East Coast society. Dressed in the impeccable style expected of her class, a tailored navy blue dress hemmed to the ankle, a velvet hat perched over her dark pompadour hair, and a fine fur muff to shield her hands. Griscom Jr., a 40-year-old Pittsburgh bachelor from a wealthy family but with a checkered reputation, including a broken engagement to another heiress, and who had been seeing Dorothy clandestinely since her college years. According to friends, Griscom had proposed marriage, but Frances Arnold opposed the match, and in the weeks before her disappearance, Dorothy's mother and brother had even traveled to Europe to confront Griscom directly. An incident sensationalized in the press with headlines like, "Griscom licked by young Arnold." In Foreign Hotel, Griscom publicly declared his love for Dorothy and his intention to marry her, but insisted he had no knowledge of her disappearance, while the Arnolds denied the Boston hotel story altogether, though the air of romantic entanglement and parental disapproval only fueled the public imagination. Historian Sylvia Pettem, who later chronicled the case in her book Cold Case Chronicles, interpreted Dorothy's desire to write, to move out, and to choose her own partner as a direct rebellion against the rigid path laid out for her, to marry well, to raise children, and to perpetuate the social order into which she had been born. And while Dorothy's public image was one of privilege and cheer, a letter she had written to Griscom shortly before vanishing revealed a more troubled emotional state. "McClure's has turned me down," she wrote. "Failure stares me in the face. I only see a straight road ahead of me." To this day, Dorothy Arnold remains frozen in that moment of her last sighting, stepping away from a friend on Fifth Avenue into the cold December air. Her figure retreating into history, leaving behind a mystery that continues to fascinate because it is so human. A young woman yearning for independence and self-expression, caught between the privileges and constraints of her era, vanishing without trace in a city that prides itself on knowing everything. The heiress at the heart of New York's oldest. The vanishing of Dorothy Arnold. New York's oldest cold case and the heiress who defied convention. Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, a Bryn Mawr graduate who wanted to be a writer and was 25 years old, went shopping on December 12, 1910, and then vanished without a trace. Her disappearance remains New York City's oldest unsolved missing person case more than a century later. It is a tantalizing mystery that has spawned theories ranging from a covert elopement to criminal activity. The daughter of a wealthy perfume importer and niece of a Supreme Court justice, Dorothy was no ordinary socialite. The fact that she was a woman struggling against the stringent expectations of her gilded world only added to the intrigue surrounding her fate. The day she vanished, the last known actions of Dorothy were extremely routine. 10:30 a.m. Left her family's home at 108 East 79th Street, telling her mother she preferred to shop alone. 11 a.m. Charged her father's account for the purchase of Engaged Girl Sketches, a humor book, At Brentano's bookstore on Fifth Avenue. 12:30 p.m. Paid full price for a half-pound box of chocolates from Park and Tilford's. At 1:45 p.m. I met my friend Gladys King at the intersection of 27th Street and Fifth Avenue. She planned to walk home through Central Park, she said. Then nothing. Dorothy left behind all of her jewelry, passports and extra clothes, wore a navy blue velvet suit, and carried $30, which is equivalent to about $1,000 today. Her family, at first unconcerned, became anxious by nightfall. However, they hired Pinkerton detectives rather than contacting the police and waited 6 weeks. The case exploded into a media frenzy in January 1911, when they finally made their identities public. The controversial secrets behind the Arnold's polished facade lay a web of secrets. The forbidden lover. Dorothy had been secretly seeing George Gardy Griscom Jr., a 40-year-old Pittsburgh playboy with a history of broken engagements. The match was strongly opposed by her parents. The pawn jewels. In September 1910, Dorothy pawned jewelry to fund a week-long tryst with Griscom at Boston's Hotel Essex, lying to her family about visiting a friend in Cambridge. The literary dreams. A published essayist, Dorothy aspired to be a writer. After McClure's magazine rejected her fiction, she confided to Griscom, "Failure stares me in the face. All I see ahead is a long, straight road." The Arnold's European trip weeks after her disappearance was later revealed to be a clandestine confrontation with Griscom in Italy. Newspapers gleefully reported, "Griscom licked by young Arnold in foreign hotel," after Dorothy's brother allegedly punched him. Griscom denied involvement in her disappearance but admitted, "I meant to marry her." The theories. Elopement gone wrong. Some speculated Dorothy fled to marry Griscom, but no evidence surfaced. Griscom lived until 1959, never got married again, and he always had Dorothy's picture on his desk. Foul play. Central Park was then a dangerous place. Could she have been robbed or attacked? There was no evidence or body to be found. Secret pregnancy. According to the tabloids, she died in an illegal abortion, but the Arnolds called this a vile fabrication. Voluntary disappearance. Did Dorothy make up her own disappearance in order to avoid the expectations of her family? Her unusual independence for a girl of her class was the subject of an article in the 1911 New York Times. The muteness of the family, the Arnolds resisted public speaking for decades. Jane Vollmer, Dorothy's great-niece, only learned about the case from a tabloid from the 1970s. "My grandmother would be horrified to have this dug up." Sylvia Pettem, a historian, contends that Dorothy's real crime was defying her role. She didn't fit the mold. She wanted to write and love her chosen person. The legacy. Dorothy's case revolutionized missing person protocols, yet her fate remains a mystery. The NYPD reopened the case in 2015, but there were no new developments. Today, her story endures as a haunting parable of Gilded Age repression and the price of defiance. Why Dorothy Arnold still captivates. The wealthy vanishing woman. Dorothy's privilege could not save her, and she was a precursor to cases like Jean Spangler and Agnes Tufferson. Media sensationalism. The press painted her as either a wayward heiress or a victim, reflecting societal anxieties about women's autonomy. A family's shame. The Arnold silence speaks volumes about the stigma of scandal in elite circles. Last thought. The disappearance of Dorothy Arnold is more than just a cold case. It is also a reflection of an era that could not comprehend a woman like her. Whether she was silenced or simply slipped away, her story remains an unsolved riddle of love, ambition, and the shadows of Fifth Avenue. Want to learn more? The Griscom Letters. Dorothy's poignant writings to her lover. Central Park in 1910. How dangerous was it really? Takes on modern forensics. Could DNA or databases today solve this? That icy Monday morning, Dorothy left her family's Upper East Side mansion on East 79th Street ostensibly to shop for a gown for her younger sister Marjorie's upcoming debutante ball, telling a friend she would be with her mother while telling her mother she preferred to shop alone, a small but telling divergence in her accounts of the day. She was dressed impeccably in a navy blue coat and ankle-length gown, topped with a black velvet hat, New York's oldest cold case. Dorothy Arnold's enduring mystery. Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, a 25-year-old graduate of Bryn Mawr University and aspiring writer from one of New York's most illustrious families, stepped out of her Upper East Side mansion to go Christmas shopping in 1910. However, she vanished into thin air. Her disappearance is still one of the most perplexing vanishings in American history, and New York City's oldest unsolved missing person case more than a century later. The circumstances of Dorothy's disappearance, her elevated social standing, the unusual response of her family, and the scandalous secrets that surfaced afterward, have sparked a plethora of speculation and established her story as a haunting parable of the repression of the Gilded Age and the limitations that even the most privileged women of the time faced. Dorothy Arnold wasn't just another socialite. She was a member of a family whose ancestry dates all the way back to the Mayflower. She was the eldest daughter of Francis and Mary Arnold. Her uncle served on the United States. Her wealthy father was an importer of perfume. Supreme Court, and the glittering debutante balls and glittering parties that defined elite New York society filled her social calendar. However, Dorothy was irritated by these gilded restrictions. She went to the progressive Bryn Mawr College in 1905 and had literary ambitions that set her apart from her peers. She submitted short stories under her own name to magazines like McClure's, which was a bold move for a woman of her class. She secretly received correspondence about her work by renting a private post office box because her family made fun of her writing ambitions. She came up with other strategies to demonstrate her independence after they turned down her request for a studio apartment in Greenwich Village. In order to comprehend her baffling disappearance, this conflict between Dorothy's unconventional spirit and the rigid expectations of her family would become crucial.